It's one of those days. I pushed a button on my. I don't even know what I did, and I know my computer, and suddenly I got music playing from here, and video won't load, and up there goes the call. I have no idea. The gremlins have invaded. You know what this means? I'm gonna have to get a new laptop. Clearly, I've gotta. I got to get the new Mac when it comes out next month, and sell my soul to China, I suppose. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson. I am delighted to have you with me wherever you are, whatever time of day it is. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. No, we're not going to start with the Democrats, and no, we're not going to start with the Republicans. No, we're not going to start with Gaza. No, we're not going to start with Hamas. Oh, we'll get to the apartheid stuff and Black Lives Matters, of course, siding with the terrorists. But nope, we're going to begin on the Little League field. Virginia Little League coaches must attend anti-racist training. The Positive Coaching Alliance is charging up to $10,000 for diversity and inclusion training. Little League, this is from the Washington Free Beacon. Alex Nestor reporting the Little League baseball coaches in Alexandria, Virginia, will be required to take a diversity, equity, and inclusion course this month. In an email to coaches on Thursday, Alexandria Little League Board President Sherry Riley announced the league's partnership with the Positive Coaching Alliance. All Little League coaches and board members were asked to cancel practices. Yes, cancel baseball practice in order to attend the Sports Can Battle Racism Workshop on May 24th. Virginia school districts have mandated similar training for their teachers. Arlington County Schools required teachers to participate in an equity training program in which they're taught how to create an actively anti-racist learning environment. Loudoun County Schools spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on teacher training sessions based on critical race theory, the idea that American institutions are inherently racist. A Sports Can Battle Racism Workshop document for coaches includes 6 core themes for creating a caring climate to model anti-racist behavior. Coaches are encouraged to teach themselves to perceive their own internalized racism and look for potential institutional racism in the community. Coaches are also asked to be on the lookout for moments that they can use as anti-racism learning opportunities. Casey Miller, a spokeswoman for the Positive Coaching Alliance, told the Washington Free Beacon the costs for training sessions vary from $1,000 to $10,000. Riley didn't respond to the Free Beacon's request for comment on how much the Alexandria Little League spent on the year-long partnership or the coaches' training. The Positive Coaching Alliance is dedicated to making each person feel a part of we. Make each person feel a part of we. So in other words, they want you to feel warm and wet. We want... I'm sorry. Oh, a part of wee. They're French. We want kids to have a positive youth character building experience and resources and training that empower youth coaches and parents, Miller told the Free Beacon. How we define culture is based on how we dive into the wee piece of that statement. What does it mean to be part of the we? Slightly warm, slightly wet, slightly yellow. Each person, no matter what background or what we look like, should we feel a part of the we? Oh my gosh. Alexandria Barry Bennett disagrees. This is Little League. Everyone plays in every game, he told the Free Beacon. This is a bunch of busybodies, virtue signaling. Leave 10-year-olds alone. Oh my gosh. Also, one resource geared towards high school student athletes is a definition guide with more than 30 entries, such as cultural appropriation, systemic racism, and intersectionality. The guide links equality with meritocracy and includes an addendum that asks whether equality is enough and if equity is a more important principle. Gender transcends biology, according to the guide, and is very complex since people can identify in diverse ways. It notes Facebook offers more than 70 gender options from normal to really crazy. The Alliance also offers a quiz that allows high school athletes to assess their privilege. Being a child of a parent or guardian with a college degree is an example of privilege. Athletes and coaches also can use the website's Identity Wheel, woohoo! Which includes sections on sex, sexual preference, race, and religion to increase awareness of how privilege operates to normalize some behaviors over others. We are at the stage in late American society where everything is about indoctrination. And really, if we're honest here, what has happened is we're at the stage where people have learned to profit on the guilty feelings of others. So much of this is white guilt. They feel guilty for being white and have decided that it's a bad thing. The color of their skin is bad. You know, here's the thing. My kid played Little League Baseball. He's played, I guess you call it Little League Soccer, recreational soccer. He's played soccer at a school. He's had black coaches and he's had white coaches. He's had black teammates and he's had white teammates. And every kid on the field is there to win and play equally. Sports is in and of itself the great equalizer. The fact that you can have kids on a baseball field where a player of another race out-hustles them and is better than them gives them an appreciation for the skills and talents of others. They don't need to be indoctrinated by leftism. And what we're seeing here now, and what you need to be mindful of, is that this is at every area, every aspect of left-wing progressive thought bubbles now, is that nothing can be left alone. When politics replaces religion and politics is everywhere, just as God is supposed to be everywhere, the government is now supposed to be everywhere, because government is your God, and it's all pervasive in every aspect of everything. And the left-wing language, the frankly communist-derived rhetoric of equity is going to be pervasive. So notice the goal used to be equality. Everyone should be treated equal, but now it's equity, that there should be an equal outcome. Now here's the problem with this. When the kids get out onto the playing field, when they get out onto the baseball diamond, will there be an equal outcome? Will there be a tied game every time? That's the logic of equity. There's going to be a tied game every time. Kids don't want that. They understand some teams are better than others. The actual equity training that the left wants to give to the kids in sports is actually undermined by the kids playing in sports. American Airlines is investigating a Texas pilot who criticized racial theory in his local school. American Airlines is investigating one of its pilots. This is from the Daily Wire. He spoke out about critical race theory being taught in his local school. The airline chose to investigate Guy Midkiff, 62, after several social media accounts urged the company to audit his social media history. Midkiff is a resident of South Lake, Texas, who has flown for American for over 3 decades. We are troubled by the allegations made and have launched an investigation into the matter. The debate over critical race theory has raged in South Lake for months, culminating earlier this month in a slew of landslide victories for Republican opponents to critical race theory to elected positions on the school board. Critical race theory curriculum in South Lake's Carroll Independent School District was the central issue. Midkiff was a vocal critic of the school's proposed CRT-inspired course called the Cultural Competence Action Plan. Advocates of the proposal accused Midkiff of using his social media accounts as well as the platform of a podcast he hosts to harass people. Midkiff has hit back at his accusers, claiming they're using bully tactics. 2 groups who pushed for CRT to be implemented took their complaints to his employer, American Airlines. American Airlines is actually more woke than Delta. You know, I had on Will Hild yesterday, who was talking about American Airlines during the pandemic, took all sorts of federal bailout money and then reduced the legroom yet again on the seats on their planes so they could squeeze more people into their planes. American Airlines is given into the woke mob. Corporate America so often gives into the woke mob. I know a guy who works for a Fortune 500 company who is now in nonstop diversity training programs. because to get ahead in his Fortune 500 company, he's got to be as woke as possible now. It is imposed on them from human resources and the lawyers. The human resources community and the legal community with inside corporations are where the wokes tend to reside, and they are forcing this level of indoctrination into American society through corporations. You've got corporations sponsoring a little league in Arlington, Virginia, that is now demanding that the players and the coaches go through anti-racism training as opposed to getting out there and playing ball. This is left-wing indoctrination to impose left-wing values on this country, the ideas of equity instead of equality. Y'all, this doesn't end well for any of us. But I think what you and I have an obligation to do is to stand up and poke at this, to laugh at these people and their obsession over this, and understand what's actually going on here. They want white people in the United States to develop some level of self-loathing, but they also want black people in this country to perceive themselves always as victims. No matter how successful you are, you're supposed to perceive every slight as some sort of injustice. You're supposed to perceive everything you don't like as a slight and then perceive that as an injustice. This is designed to divide. This is designed to disrupt. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chinese and the Russians are funding this stuff. I mean, this is a deeply divisive curriculum being pushed out by essentially, the irony here is there's a bunch of white people pushing this. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them know they're being funded by outside groups designed to divide and disrupt the United States of America. The idea that this country is systemically racist then begs the question of how do you get rid of systemic racism? If everyone in this country is part of it, if all white people have some level of privilege that benefits them, one, why are you asking them to give it up? Two, can they give it up? Three, how can you get rid of it if it's designed into the systems? You can't. That's the answer that you're supposed to eventually get to, is you can't actually fix it. When nothing really changes over time, you're then to come to the logical conclusion the United States is illegitimate and we must blow it up. Because for example, the Senate is supposedly somehow deeply undemocratic. It is a racist institution. It is propped up to protect the racists. The Electoral College is racist. States' rights are racist. The states themselves are racist. It's all racist. We've got to end the United States. This is happening from the inside out. The United States cannot be taken out by those on the outside. They can only be taken out by those on the inside. And a bunch of people on the left are hell-bent on destroying this country from the inside out, peddling the mythology that the country is systemically racist. And now you got a bunch of people out there who have internalized so much that they're victims that they can hear me say the United States is not systemically racist. Well, why are you denying racism? I'm not denying racism. Racism is real. There are individuals in this country who are racist. The idea that the United States of America that elected its first black president in 2008 and its first black female vice president in 2020 is inherently racist, a nation that has made hundreds and hundreds of black people multimillionaires, billionaires, that elevates people like Oprah Winfrey to the head of cultural commentary and puts LeBron James on the basketball field and throws all sorts of money at him despite his obnoxious political views and wokeism and willing to turn a blind eye to the persecution of those in Hong Kong. This country is not a racist nation. Are there problems? Yes. Always have been, always will be. The solution is not to guilt a bunch of white people into believing that they are somehow oppressors, nor is the solution to convince a bunch of black people that they are continually oppressed. If you cannot see that this country has improved over time, the problem is with you, not the rest of us. And what's really at the bottom happening here is a bunch of white people have figured out how they can profit from those who are just fully indoctrinated into the idea of white guilt. You actually kind of got to admire their success of making millions of dollars off other people feeling guilty, because you then get to go tell them, yes, in fact, that guilt is there because you're a racist. Let me help you. And what do? Well, Give me more of your money and let's keep talking. It is an incredible shakedown. It's all part of the we.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Oh my goodness gracious. I didn't intend to continue on this vein. This is somewhat nuts. Wow. Welcome, by the way. The phone number here is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Chelsea Clinton, the daughter of the former president of the United States, has tweeted this lesson number 2 from racial rehab today. Just because your skin is white doesn't mean you have to be white. When did it become bad to be white? But also, what is whiteness? What does it mean to be white? Is Chelsea Clinton going to give up her house? Is she going to give up her income? Is she going to give up the things that the left teaches her comes from being white, the privileges she had of virtue of being white? And by the way, what the hell is racial rehab anyway? Well, here's let me be explicitly clear to you what's going on here. This is the emergence of a new aspect of the secular religion where race is sin. It's almost as if they are reversing the old Southern racist mythology of, the mark of Cain or whatever, or the whatever that black people were somehow punished by God. We're seeing the emergence of the reverse of this from secular elite, that somehow whiteness is a sin when skin color is just skin color. It's amazing how fixated the left is on skin color. You would think that they were Southerners pre-Civil War. It's the idea that you've got to go to racial rehab. The idea as well that somehow you've received see how they twist and pervert real religion. You've been blessed with a mother and a father and a college degree. That means it's your privilege. What they want you to believe is that you got it because of your skin color, not because of your work. They wish you to devalue yourself, which is racist. At Cornell, there's no clear mandate for critical race theory, according to Legal Insurrection. Bad news and good news coming out of the Cornell University Faculty Senate vote on critical race theory mandates for faculty and students. The bad news is the Faculty Senate nominally voted for some forms of critical race theory mandates on faculty and students. The good news is that the margins were surprisingly thin. There was surprisingly substantial opposition, and some of the 6 resolutions contradicted others, leaving a muddied mess that has to be viewed as a loss for proponents who must have expected overwhelming support. The only thing that's clear is that there's no mandate from the Faculty Senate as the issue moves from the merely advisory Faculty Senate to the president of the university. If the president and possibly the board of trustees wants to implement these anti-educational initiatives, they're going to have to do so on their own because there really isn't any support. The whole thing is rather bizarre. Cornell has wanted to do compulsory racial activism for faculty and staff. I'm sure maybe the white kids will have to go through racial rehab. Now listen, back to this Chelsea Clinton thing. No one forced her to go to it. No one forced her to go to it. She chose to do it, and that's her choice. If you choose to waste your time feeling guilty about your life, that's fine. We are a nation of 350 million people, more than half of whom have therapists at this moment to help them overcome trauma. I guess now the new trauma will be they happen to be born white, and maybe can they identify as black? Is this what she's getting at? Still, it's a religious replacement for God. 30. And that ultimately, you do need to understand this. This is all about replacing God. This is all about the government as the new religion and secularism on the rise. It's got its liturgies and it's got its creeds. And one of the growing creeds is that if you're a white person, you're a racist. That is a creedal statement for the left these days. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, should you wish to be a part of this here program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. What a bizarre thing this January 6th commission is. The Democrats are convinced there needs to be a commission to look into what happened on January 6th. I would like to say out of the gate, there are certainly questions. Did the police let people into the building? Did the police collaborate with those who were insurrectionists? Is the left willing to admit that overwhelmingly the people who were inside the Capitol were there thinking that they had been let in as the first wave went in? Others wandered around, thought they were allowed to be there, didn't realize they were trespassing. After all, it's the Capitol. Tourists are welcome in. There were certainly people who were there who had malintent and are being prosecuted. I'm not necessarily opposed to a commission generally, but it does seem like Congress itself doesn't need a commission. It could look into this. What did the Capitol Police do and not do? How were they funded? These are legitimate questions that should be looked into. But it seems like Kevin McCarthy himself kind of screwed up. He let Congressman John Katko be the Republican to negotiate the formation of this 9/11 commission. And now he has thrown Katko under the bus. Katko was one of the Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump. Why do you allow that guy to negotiate on behalf of a Republican conference that overwhelmingly opposed the impeachment of Donald Trump? Why do you do that? It wasn't smart of McCarthy, but what it has done is it has allowed the media to drag out the story to make yet again the Republicans be the bad guys. I do want you to understand Republicans don't really care. They really don't care. But it has allowed that conversation to perpetuate. I want to explain a little bit of what's happening here. There's a story. It is a story that came out at 5 p.m. yesterday. This is the headline. This is a National Public Radio story. America's satanic panic returns, this time through QAnon. The first time sociologist Mary DeYoung heard about QAnon, she thought, here we go again. DeYoung spent her career studying moral panics, specifically what became known as the satanic panics of the 1980s, where false accusations of abuse of children and satanic rituals spread across the United States. Decades later, echoes of that same fear had emerged in QAnon. The seemingly novel conspiracy theory had grown in far-right political circles since November of 2017. Adherents of QAnon believe there's a shadowy cabal kidnapping children, torturing them, and using their blood in satanic rituals. The alleged perpetrators in the QAnon conspiracy theory are Democratic politicians, not preschool teachers, as has been the case since the 1980s, but the accusations are eerily similar. Every moral panic has to have a folk devil. You mean like white-skinned people to the elites in their moral panic right now. DeYoung says every moral panic needs to have a folk devil. The author, DeYoung, was the author of the Daycare Ritual Abuse Moral Panic. It has to have a person, or more likely a group of people, whether real individuals or fantasized individuals, who are the devils in the middle of all of it. One of the earliest bellwethers of the satanic panic came in 1980 with the publication of Michelle Remembers, a memoir co-written by Canadian psychologist Lawrence Pazder and his patient Michelle Smith. The book graphically details abuse that Smith claimed to have suffered as a child at the hands of a satanic cult, abuse that she had allegedly forgotten, but eventually recovered through her work with Pazder. The book was a bestseller. Pazder became the leading academic voice warning about the dangers of ritual abuse. He also began to consult with prosecutors in criminal trials, including the case that would spread fear of satanic abuse even further around the country, the McMartin preschool trial. I thought it was the case of our time, says Danny Davis, attorney for defendant Ray Buckley. Ray, a teacher at Virginia McMartin's preschool in Manhattan Beach, California, was accused of abusing one of his students. By the following string, the accusations had grown to include hundreds of children, and rumors swirled that the students had been abused in satanic rituals at cemeteries and in tunnels underneath the school. It was a social contagion. This isn't a bad story. It is notably, though, a national public radio story. May 18th, 2021. How many of you are thinking about QAnon? Where is QAnon in the headlines right now? It's really mostly nowhere to be seen. I don't think it's a coincidence that the liberal news organization that most liberals get their news from when they're on radio is suddenly dredging back up QAnon at a time it's not really in people's minds. They're doing it to try to keep it alive in your mind. Kate Bennett at CNN, Trump ditches Florida and heads north for the summer. As reliably as seasons change, so does Donald Trump shift his primary residence. After establishing Mar-a-Lago, his lavish Palm Beach, Florida resort, as his post-White House home and office for the last 4 months, Trump a week ago moved his base operation to his members-only Bedminster, New Jersey golf club, where he will reside for the rest of the spring, summer, and into early fall. A senior member of the former president's team confirmed to CNN. They can't quit him. They cannot quit Donald Trump. They are obsessed with his movements. They are obsessed with his statements. QAnon is back at the forefront. At a time the House Democrats are pursuing a January 6th commission, and it is of universal acclaim in the media outside Fox that it is necessary, and Republicans are obstructing the truth, and how dare those Republicans. You got Andrew Clyde making his kind of dumb statement about tourists in the Capitol when the picture comes out of him blocking the doors of the House so they can't get in there. That was a unforced error on his part. The media, of course, is coming after him. These are all distractions. They are designed to keep the discord within the Republican Party at the forefront as discord within the Democratic Party is growing. They are designed to keep the issue in front of voters because November 2022 is a long time away. They are designed to try to turn voters off to the GOP as a way to forestall voters being turned off by the Democrats who control everything in Washington. There is an amazing media obsession for a party in Washington, D.C. they have declared is dead and dying and controls nothing. We haven't had QAnon in the news for months on end, and suddenly we're back to QAnon on NPR. Donald Trump is not on social media. He's largely out of sight, out of mind. And suddenly he's back in the news full time on a daily basis. If not the Liz Cheney Donald Trump fight, it's the Donald Trump is going on vacation to New Jersey fight. An argument and coverage and nonsense from the media. This is all about voters. This is a well-orchestrated plan by the media. I don't know that the average member of the media even understands how they're being played, but at the upper echelons of the media and the Democratic Party, they do completely believe the more they can keep Donald Trump at the forefront of people's minds, the more they can keep QAnon at the forefront of people's minds, the better it is for the Democrats. Now, why is that? There's a lot of polling showing that your average voter doesn't particularly care for Donald Trump. In fact, if anything, this is kind of a sign that the Democrats are finally clued in on the fact that they really did not have a great election night other than Joe Biden winning, and they did so. They didn't have a good night because of the defund the police movement and the left-wing agitation in the country, but also Donald Trump had a bad night because he was on people's minds and people generally didn't care for Donald Trump. You may like Donald Trump, but the average voter decided they were tired of him potentially starting World War III on Twitter. So guess what? Twitter and Facebook banned Donald Trump from social media. He loses. He goes away. He's nowhere to be seen. He's not tweeting. The media can't report on his tweets. They've got to have him. They got to have him for their ratings. Donald Trump inarguably helped the media's ratings, and they've got to have him, they think, to help the Democrats. As much as you can focus on Trump and QAnon and Liz Cheney, you are helping the Democrats, so the media believes. I don't actually think they're right. Because so much of what Donald Trump said and did on the campaign trail was to say, These things will happen if Joe Biden becomes president of the United States. And guess what? They're all happening. They're all happening. Donald Trump, if he were to run in 2024, could run on a "see, I told you so" campaign. I don't think leaving Donald Trump in the forefront of people's minds right now does much good because, one, voters realize he's not president, and two, they see the wokes, they see the riots, they see Joe Biden, they see and fuel the crime wave and the inflation, and Donald Trump's not there. This is all under Joe Biden. The media is desperate to help Joe Biden through this. I think it actually hurts Joe Biden. Concurrent to this, major headlines today. Let me read you the Wall Street Journal report. The New York Attorney General's office investigation of former President Donald Trump's business now has a criminal component, a spokesman said Tuesday night, joining the Manhattan District Attorney's office probe and expanding a months-long inquiry that until now had been focused on civil fraud. We have informed the Trump Organization that our investigation into the organization is no longer purely civil in nature, said Fabian Levy, a spokesman for the Attorney General's office. We are now actively investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal capacity along with the Manhattan DA. The Manhattan District Attorney's office is conducting an investigation into possible bank fraud and other potential crimes. Separately, the top local prosecutor in the Atlanta area is probing whether Mr. Trump improperly tried to influence election officials last year. The Trump Organization did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the investigation, which was reported earlier by CNN. Now, question, is this actually true? You do have a spokesman coming out and saying so possibly it is. But saying there's a criminal probe, if you're a prosecutor looking into this sort of stuff, of course, there's going to be a criminal element to it. This really isn't news per se, but the media, of course, is gravitating towards it. I do, however, think there's something else going on here. The Democrats have internalized Orange Man bad. The Democrats fundamentally believe that Donald Trump is the villain. They really believe, like Jay Rosen, the well-respected New York University journalism professor, really actually admitted he believes that the United States is on the verge of turning into a white Christian nationalist nation, an authoritarian one. The Democrats, it's bat poop crazy, but the Democrats have internalized that. They have, listen, the same people who are scarred by a virus and can't take their mask off are, of course, emotionally and mentally scarred by the events of January 6th. And they have internalized it, the worst possible scenario. They have no reason to want to know or understand Donald Trump's voters. They think they're all racist. They have internalized that it's a bunch of white people and white people are bad. Therefore, Donald Trump's supporters, they're all bad. They're all racist. We don't need to know them. We need to destroy them. And I think they overplay their hand on this. I do think it generates backlash. I do think when you've got the New York Attorney General, you got the Manhattan District Attorney, you've got a Georgia District Attorney, they're all piling on Donald Trump. At some point, it looks like a vendetta, not legitimate prosecutions. It looks like they're trying to punish Donald Trump for being. And I think that draws a backlash from the American public who tends to get outraged by that sort of stuff. But also, I do think this has a lot to do with Donald Trump 2024. Donald Trump needs to make it look like he's running again in 2024, or people are going to move on rather quickly. He's got to continue to stay relevant. He's got to stay relevant by flirting with 2024 so that he has clout within the Republican Party in 2022 to punish his enemies. If Donald Trump says, well, I'm not running again, and he does it right now, suddenly people are no longer going to be paying attention to him. They're going to be looking for the next Trump. And then Trump doesn't have the clout he needs to go after the people he wants to go after in 2022, including my governor, Brian Kemp, here in Georgia, who is announcing his reelection today. Trump's got to have that clout. The Democrats, of course, have internalized this as, oh my gosh, he's coming back. We've got to stop him. I am not yet convinced that Donald Trump really does want to run again in 2024. I am convinced he can't let anyone know he's not inclined to because he needs that 2022 clout. The moment he says he's not running again is the moment the Republican Party starts looking for a replacement. So he's got to do this. Maybe he will run again. I don't know. My inclination is 78, 79 years old. But by him not saying I'm done, emboldens the press to continue to keep him at the forefront, and also emboldens the prosecutors to continue to try to destroy him. This is all about, these prosecutions at this point are all about stopping a Trump 2024 bid. They don't necessarily even want to be successful. They just want to bankrupt the man. These are punitive retribution for Donald Trump beating Hillary Clinton. That's what it is. Maybe they'll find something wrong, but if a prosecutor digs into anyone's life deep enough, they're going to find something they can prosecute. And in Donald Trump's case, the media will give it all sorts of legitimacy, whether it needs or not. And 3 years from now, after all the lawyers have spent all of his money and he's found not guilty by a jury of his peers, they won't care. They stopped him from running in 2024. Donald Trump doesn't just live rent-free in these people's heads. He inhabits their nightmares. And honestly, for his own good, the moment he says he's not running again, probably a lot of it goes away. But he wants vengeance on those he thinks slighted him, and he's not going to do that. So this is going to go on for a while, and the media will have lots of fodder to try to do Orange Man bad coverage for the next several years to try to turn voters off. But who is more likely to turn the voters off? The man who is not president of the United States, or the man who is and tanked the American economy when it was doing real well until a virus hit with Donald Trump in charge?
News and in-depth analysis from Erick.
Hi there, how are you? The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to get my interview with Alex Gandler, he's the Deputy Counsel of Israel to the Southeast United States, or you want my primer, however you want to say it, on the Israel-Palestinian situation, the history of Israel, you can text the word data to 33777, and I will provide you those links. You can also subscribe to my daily email. Anyway, subscribers get show clips, transcripts, things like that. Also, it is my time. In fact, I went to a dinner last night. So I'm involved in an organization, 98 years old. I got roped into it, preparing a paper. I did a paper last night on the origins of the descent unto hell clause of the Apostles' Creed. Yes. And so the deal is, so you buy dinner for everybody and then you prepare an academic paper for them. But while I was there, one of the guys who was there says he had just bought the 3-pack of the Eden Pure Thunderstorm air purifiers. I told him he was going to like them. We really do like them in our house. And I tend to be skeptical of these sorts of devices. This actually does work. It works well, so well now that I can fry fish in the kitchen and I turn on the Eden Pure Thunderstorm and it gets rid of the odor. We don't have to do the essential oil stuff my wife typically does and things like that. It really does work. Right now, you can get 3 of them for $187 and saves you $200. But let me explain to you how you're going to do this. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. That's the website. EdenPureDeals.com. And you'll see my name. You click it, and when you click it, you'll see a 3-pack of the Eden Pure Thunderstorm air purifier. This thing gets rid of black mold. It gets rid of odors. It gets rid of mildew, gets rid of pollen, and it's filterless. You don't have to worry about changing the filters. And so you get this thing, and you'll see it's $387 for 3 of them. And when you click through the checkout, you'll see a little coupon box, a little discount code box, and you put my name in, Erick, E-R-I-C-K, and remarkably, magically, the price drops by $200, and shipping is free. So go to EdenPureDeals.com, click on my name, get them. It'll say $387. Don't freak out. You click through and put my name in the discount code box, and it'll drop the price by $200. So it'll be $187, and they're worth it. You can put them in your RV. You can put them in your car. Keep them in your house. They're fantastic. EdenPureDeals.com is the website. I got to give a shout out to Texas. Texas has become the 3rd state after Utah and Oklahoma to allow free-range children. Now, what exactly is this law? Essentially, you can no longer be investigated for neglect simply by letting your kids run free or having your kids away from you for some amount of time. When I was 11 years old, my parents decided that I was old enough to be loaded by myself onto a 747 and flown to the United States of America. We lived in Dubai. I wanted to go home early. They allowed it. I flew home, and over the Black Sea, the plane broke, and we had to land in Innsbruck, Austria with no hydraulics on a foam runway and go down a slide. It was exciting. And then I got stuck in Amsterdam and had to stay in the red light district in a Crown Plaza hotel. I did. True story. Absolutely true story. In fact, while I was sleeping in the hotel room by myself, a couple from the hotel, I presume they were from the employee, they got into my room and I woke up to them getting it on the bed. I woke up screaming and they took off running. Yeah, it was an amazing adventure. And after that, my parents were like, you want to go somewhere? Go. Free range parenting in Texas. There have been a series of abuses of people harassing parents who have to leave their kids alone for a short period of time. Those parents can no longer be prosecuted in Texas. One woman got prosecuted because she left her kids 15 feet away from her while she conducted a job interview. It's absurd. She went to jail, by the way. Not anymore under this law. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Glad to have you with me today. And you can call in. You can go to ewerickson.com. Many of you have been emailing. I mentioned how I smoke my wings on my Rectech. The recipe is there. ewerickson.com. Click the recipe tab. You can get it there. You can also follow me on social media at EW Erickson. And right now, I got to shake up what I was going to talk about and talk about something completely different. We'll get to what I was going to talk about. Black Lives Matters, of course, siding with a terrorist organization, Hamas. We'll get there. But first, Josh Krashour at National Journal has this. There are two different ways to judge President Biden's political standing after his first 4 months in office. One could rate his average approval rating of 53% as healthy, given the backdrop of political partisanship in the country and his predecessor's inability to ever hit the 50% mark. Or you could assess it as underwhelming, given that Biden overall popularity ranks near the bottom of modern presidents and is poised to decline further amid a rough stretch of news. A newly released poll from the Democratic firm Democracy Corps, surveying battleground states and congressional districts, lends fuel to the more pessimistic outlook for Biden and congressional Democrats. Conducted between April 27th and May 3rd, the survey finds that Republicans are tied with Democrats on the generic congressional ballot in swing states and districts. Again, if you missed it, this is from Stan Greenberg, a respected Democratic pollster. Say what you will about polling, but when Stan Greenberg does a poll that is a Democrat poll on behalf of Democrats, and it finds bad news for the Democrats, regardless of the accuracy of the poll, you should pay attention. Republicans are showing more enthusiasm for their party. The percentage of Democrats showing the highest level of engagement dropped from 85% just before last year's election to 57% in this month's survey. By contrast, 68% of Republicans say they're still highly engaged compared to 84% before the election. Far from being a divided party, Republicans look awfully united behind Donald Trump's brand of populist, culture war-driven politics. The purging of outspoken Trump critics like Liz Cheney from the party isn't dissuading traditional Republicans from maintaining their partisan affiliation. In these battlegrounds, Republicans are holding on to more than 87% of the non-Trump conservatives, a constituency more skeptical of the former president, which is 5% defecting to Democrats. A clear majority of moderate Republicans are also sticking with the party for next year, which is 13% preferring Democrats. Republicans are also holding on to the softest part of their coalition while maintaining the enthusiasm of the Trump base. On this competitive turf, Biden's job approval rating is at 49%, with 45% disapproving. But the intensity of support or opposition tips the scales towards Republicans. 33% view the president very favorably, while 38% view him very unfavorably. He's losing ground with independents. 35% of swing voters approve of the president's performance, while 47% disapprove. Democrats are winning a mere 17% support among independents on the generic ballot, with 34% backing Republicans and 45% plurality saying they're undecided. These battleground results suggest that while Republicans' brand is battered over their loyalty to Trump, the Democratic Party's own leftward drift is also deeply alienating the middle-of-the-road voters. We are surprised by how much Donald Trump's loyalist party is totally consolidated at this early point in 2022 and how engaged it is. Democrats cannot fail to see how Trump's party is fully engaged with its ongoing culture war, focused on crime, open borders, and defunding the police. Democrats are at risk of repeating 2020 if they do not prioritize diffusing and neutralizing it. Anti-Trump former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman, an outspoken critic of his own party's extreme turn, nonetheless is bullish about the GOP's short-term future, even predicting a landslide showing for down-ballot Republicans in next year's midterms. The issue is between crazy and crazier. A lot of Democrats are becoming disengaged on the moderate side because you're seen screaming on social issues and foreign policy issues. People are not nuts. Right now, crazy is an amazing fuel, but so are crazy policies. I think there could be a 20 to 40 point swing in the House towards towards Republicans. If Democrats want to be competitive, don't try and match the crazy. Okay, I want to break some of this down for you. Democratic pollster Stan Greenberg, very respected among the Democrats, has done a poll. It shows that Republicans are actually almost completely united, and that in swing districts and in swing states, Joe Biden's popularity is less than 50%, and that Republicans are at parity with Democrats on the congressional ballot, generic congressional ballot. The generic congressional ballot is important because if Republicans are within 3 or 4 points of the Democrats, behind the Democrats on the generic ballot, given the history of the generic ballot, who do you prefer to run Congress, the Democrats or Republicans? We have a pattern of polling that stretches back decades. And we know, regardless of how good or bad the polling is, if Republicans are within 4 points, for sure, on the generic ballot, they can be behind by 4 points, and they generally will take up the House of Representatives. If they're tied with the Democrats in the generic ballot, they tend to do very well in the House of Representatives, and that's where they are right now. The Democratic Party has seen a drop-off in enthusiasm, and that happens by midterms. They won. They have continued, they have sustained themselves, they have mobilized, they have engaged, they won, and now they're ready for a break. And this happens to whichever party wins. While the Republicans, having lost, are further energized to win it all back. And so they will rebound in the midterm. But there's a little bit more, too. If you go back to 2019 and 2020, the media did a series of fawning profiles of Nancy Pelosi. Nothing Pelosi did could go wrong. Everything Nancy Pelosi did was brilliant. And we should have more people like Nancy Pelosi. That was the media characterization. When Nancy Pelosi was obstructing checks, when Nancy Pelosi was refusing to walk away from the progressive members of her caucus, the media thought it was all good. The media thought it was all right. Part of the media's problem is that they're in a Democratic bubble, and it then gives the Republicans a latent advantage because the Democrats can't see what's coming, nor can the media. So, for example, right now, as I mentioned earlier, and have mentioned repeatedly, the Democrats are obsessed with the Liz Cheney-Donald Trump fight because it highlights for them a division within the Republican Party, a necessary division. They are renewed in their obsession with QAnon to paint the Republicans as a crazy fringe. They are fixated on Donald Trump at all times and want to keep him in the headlines because they know that a lot of voters don't like him. And on top of all of that, they are convinced the Republican Party is dying and about to crack up. It is conventional wisdom now in Washington, D.C., in the media and the Democratic Party, that the Republican days are numbered due to internal fights and the division over Donald Trump. So to fire up their base, the Democrats say, let's go full left. Let's inspire a progressive revolution in America. Let's go woke. Let's go for broke. Back the Palestinians, defund the police, rearrange the values and priorities of America, punish stay-at-home parents, put them at a competitive disadvantage to working parents, vilify them for not helping their kids, on and on it goes. All the left-wing agenda, raise taxes on the rich, where the rich are defined as the middle class, raise taxes on businesses, ignore inflation, ignore the debt. Well, the Republicans did too, so why not? They've bought into the mythology. Now, let's go back to the Nancy Pelosi example. They did that in 2019 and 2020. What happened? Republicans came very close to taking back the House of Representatives. There was a blue wave. Every time that there was a story about how genius Nancy Pelosi was, another poll came out, and it showed the Democrats were about to crush the GOP. The GOP was going to get wiped out in the House of Representatives. The Republicans are within 5 seats of the majority now. The Republicans could take back the House of Representatives with redistricting alone. And the Democrats never saw it coming, in large part because the media perpetuated the Democratic talking points and reassured them they were true. So right now, the media is telling the Democrats, don't worry, the GOP is really divided. The GOP can't put forward candidates. They're going to have nasty primaries. Have you paid attention to what has happened in races so far? in special elections in New Mexico and in Arizona and the gubernatorial race in Virginia. Republicans found candidates who liked Donald Trump but were not Trump apologists. They didn't defend everything he did. They were able to bridge divides between the party. They aren't moderate. They're certainly conservative. They're certainly pro-Trump, but they're not the Trump-level candidate of, say, a Vernon Jones in Georgia, who the diehard Trump fans insist they're gonna run him against Brian Kemp and he's gonna win, and he's not, because the Republican Party in Georgia wants to beat Stacey Abrams. They want to win. They don't want to scratch the president's itch at the expense of ultimate victory. But the Democrats and the media have convinced themselves the Republican Party will annihilate itself over fighting about Donald Trump, particularly if they can keep the Liz Cheney-Donald Trump feud alive. They can keep the Republican Party divided and at each other's throat, and they can run up the middle, except they're not running up the middle, they're running up the far side of the left. And in so doing, there are a whole lot of voters in the middle who are like, oh my God, I thought these guys were crazy. Those people are insane. I'm going to go with crazy because I don't want to go to insanity. Voters will go for crazy when the other side looks like new levels of crazy and insanity. Do you want crazy or do you want bat poop crazy? Because there's a difference. I assure you the difference. And the media can't see it. And because the Democrats listen to the left-wing media on MSNBC and the reporters at CNN who are so broken by Donald Trump, they read the New York Times and the Washington Post, all of whom were broken by Donald Trump. They internalize Donald Trump's criticisms of them as the press is the enemy of the people. They think the Republicans are therefore bad and going to get them all killed. They've internalized the hate. They can no longer report accurately on what's going on the ground. And that, as a result, is sending the Democrats false signals about how to play their hand come 2022. And Stan Greenberg, a Democratic pollster, is picking up the warning signs for the Democratic Party. They're believing the media. Never believe your own press. And right now, the American press corps is the Democrats' press, and the Democrats are believing it wholesale. They're believing the propaganda. While the Republicans have done what? They've united the party across Trump and anti-Trump lines. They have found that voters are voting out of cultural concern and fear for their lives over defunding the police and economic protection and jobs, and that voters, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, really hate the woke BS. They genuinely, the voters, despise the racist politics of the Democratic Party. Voters have for years been told judge each other by the content of character, not the color of skin. And now the woke white elite of the Democratic Party are telling them, no, skin color is what matters. And they know it's not true. You have the left pushing children to go to anti-racist camps where the white kids are told they're oppressors and the black kids are told they're oppressed. And the voters, they're not down with it. They see those same people burning the streets down across America, and the left saying, well, they're fiery but mostly peaceful. They see the Democrats wanting to back a terrorist group in Israel. They see the Democrats wanting to fill up the Supreme Court with a bunch of progressives just like them and get rid of the filibuster and rush through a host of left-wing initiatives. And the American people kind of get freaked out by it. And the American press tells them, oh, no, it's all a good thing. It's all a good thing. And then tells the Democrats, yeah, they're so divided. They're so divided. They're so divided. They can't win. Do it. Rally your base, Democrats. Rally your base. Go hard, go left, go big, or go home. And the Democrats do it. And then on election day, the Democrats are going to see the results and think, I guess the Republicans really did suppress the vote because we lost. And they'll believe that mythology. And you know what? The media will tell them that, and it'll drive them further insane in the run-up to 2024.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. I am glad to have you with me today. I hope it's beautiful where you are, because it is where I am, but man, is it about to get hot in the South. The phone number, if you want to be on the show, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Memorial Day is going to be here. I am going to be stepping out. Gosh, I think it's next Thursday and Friday for Memorial Day. I am headed up to Clayton and Clarksville in Northeast Georgia, Rabun, Habersham counties. We got a cabin in the mountains to go hang out. My family has never been up there. I want to take them. And I have already put in my order for the Omaha Steaks Let's Go Grill Pack. I will be taking them. I got the folks at RecTech, they heard my monologue and they were very kind and sent me a cooler. And I will be loading it up with ice, and I will be taking all our great food to grill out, including the 12 burgers from Omaha Steaks. They're free. I ordered the package, folks. They didn't send it to me as a gift. I actually bought it myself. I am a customer. If you go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar, you will get their butcher cut fillets. They are famously aged to bring out the beefy flavor in the fillets. You'll get pork chops. You will get boneless, skinless chicken breasts. You will get sausages. You'll get caramel apple tartlets. You'll get, I think, potatoes au gratin. You'll get 12 burgers, almost 4 pounds of burgers for free. That's right. The burgers are free, and you get $20 off your first order. Now, I didn't get the $20 off because I order from them all the time. But if this is your first time, you get $20 off. It's a great deal. Really is. It's a great introductory deal to Omaha Steaks because you get kind of a wide selection, and it's all good. The burgers themselves, I know what you're thinking. No, you go to the grocery store like I'll sometimes do, and you get ground chuck and you make your patties. This is actually the Omaha Steaks. It's their steak burgers, and they're good. They're a great blend of beef. Great beefy flavor. They hold up well on the grill. You can do them as smash burgers if you got one of those Blackstone griddles, which I do. I did that the other day on Sunday. That's how I did my burgers, and we'll be taking them with us to the mountains. I am excited to go up there. I'm excited to go up to Clarksville and to Clayton and to Lake Burton, and I'm excited to eat my Omaha Steak burgers that I got for free by ordering this package. So go to Omaha Steaks today, put Georgia in the search bar, get this great deal, and you too can have a fantastic Memorial Day. I got to tell you, I have a commitment to go up to Rome and hang out with some listeners up there who have invited me up for some bourbon bourbon and cigar night. And I think Philip and I at some point we're gonna have to hit the road and go up and hang out with them. And I really, really love the Rome area. And until I started doing this program, I had never been to Northeast Georgia. I'd never been to Habersham County. I'd never been to Rabun County. And I've always wanted to go to Lake Burton. I've got know people who have houses up there. They're rich people, way richer than me. And I got invited to stay at a condo up at the Waterfalls, which is the Nick Saban-owned golf course up there. And now I can't get an invite back to that place. And I've been dying to go back to that condo that I stayed in. But we got on Airbnb, my wife and kids. I've been telling them, you got to go up there. It's beautiful. You can go to Helen and fly fish. You can go to Clarksville and fly fish. You can go up to Lake Burton, go to Clayton. There are lots of great restaurants in Clarksville and Clayton. The Copper Kettle Copper Pot in Clarksville was fantastic. They had a great meatball sub when I was up there last month. And then the U Joint in Clayton, and of course Wander North Georgia is a brilliant store up there, and I'm dying to take the kids up to Northeast Georgia, and I need a vacation. Believe it or not, 6 hours of radio a day, nonstop, actually wears you out. Thankfully, that is coming to an end very soon, and there will be some sacrifices made along the way, I guess. I'm afraid some of my stations can't stick with me when the change is made to just do 1 noon to 3 show. But it's coming, and I'm so ready for it. It has been a struggle for the last month. I'm not here for a pity party or any of that. I'm just telling you, I'm ready for Memorial Day. I'm ready to go grill burgers and sit on a mountaintop and admire it. I wish I could get in that condo and look down at Lake Burton, but one day that's aspirational. I need to buy one of those places. It's just, I love that. I love it up there, and now I've gotten into fly fishing. And I'm going to take my gear with me, and I could just stand in a creek and try to catch. I don't know what I'll do if I catch them, though, because you got to touch them if you catch them. And I'm just fishy sliminess. I'll do it. I may have to have my kids do it. All right, when we come back,
30.
Black Lives Matter has decided to go all in for the terrorists. Of course they have. Wait until you hear their justification for why. I told y'all this was coming. It's nothing new, but now they're being open and explicit
15.
about the anti-Semitism in Black Lives Matters. At least they're owning it.
10.
The rest of us need to expose it. I got a moment of candor. I averted a crisis. I did, and potential trouble in my marriage. We had a housekeepers were here cleaning up, and my wife is out. I left. I ran to the restroom. The toilet seat was up. The housekeepers did it, but you and I both know that if my wife came home and saw the toilet seat up in the bathroom, you know whose fault it would be. Would not be the housekeeper's fault. I assure you. I have averted the crisis. Now, I must play you some audio. Let me explain to you what's about to happen. I am about to play some audio, and it is in Hebrew. You're not going to be able to understand it, but I'm still going to play it, and I'm going to talk over it and read for you the subtitle so that you know what's going on. An IDF, Israeli Defense Force soldier, has called a man in Gaza and told the man that his building is going to be bombed and he needs to evacuate the people from the building. This is from Sky News. I want you to hear this.
يا حبيبي أنا بقدرش أطلع
I
كل الناس
can't get all the people out. I need at least 2 hours to get them out. Listen, we're going to bomb the building. You want to bomb? Bomb whatever you want. No, brother, we need to do everything we can so that you don't die. We want to die. But you have a responsibility for children's lives. If the children need to die, they'll die. God forbid, God forbid. Why do you want to die? This is how we respond to your cruelty. We will let the children die. We want to die. If the children need to die, then they'll die. God forbid, God forbid. Why do you want to die? This is how we reveal your cruelty. This is what Israel is dealing with. Hamas, by the way, it turns out, had 3 floors of the Associated Press building. Israeli Public Broadcasting notes that Israeli Defense Force official says despite the demand from foreign media for the publication of evidence of Hamas presence in the bomb media building in Gaza, it will probably not be released since it's highly classified intelligence material. This is also the reason why Israel passed the information to the Pentagon through the Ministry of Defense and not through the diplomatic channels. The information passed said Hamas operated in 3 floors conducting technological operations. They will not show the full extent of the information because it would reveal means of collection, among other things. But they had 3 floors. Now, this is not unexpected, but Black Lives Matter has declared ending settler colonialism in all forms and will continue to advocate for Palestinian liberation. What is this about? In the 1960s, and I may sound like a broken record for some of you, but it's important for those who haven't heard this to hear it, and for you who have heard it to hear it again. In the 1960s, socialists, progressives, left-wing activists, and academics, led by essentially a Soviet propaganda campaign, as the Soviets increasingly sided with the Palestinians, as the Israelis increasingly sided with Americans, began to embrace the idea that the Israelis were white European colonists, and they were colonizers taking over a territory that did not belong to them. The Romans, when they threw the Jews out, renamed the territory Palestine. That name stuck until 1947. So from 135 AD to 1947, Israel had been changed to the phrase Palestine. And then Israel comes back. And the Palestinians were not technically a homogenous people. They were groups of people referred to as Palestinians because they lived in the area called Palestine. The Arab nations refused to recognize the Israeli state, invaded when Israel formed as a nation, Israel pushed back and won and captured more territory and built up a perimeter around their nation, knowing that every nation around them wanted them destroyed. What happened then is that the Arab nations that had held on to the Palestinians let the Palestinians flood back in, and the Palestinians started making claims on territory Israel had won in war and have no intention of giving up. Israel ultimately did give up the Gaza Strip. In fact, Israel removed all the Jews from Gaza, made them leave. You wouldn't know that the way Black Lives Matter says they want Palestinian liberation. Their claim now is for the West Bank, an area that Israel captured. It was indisputably archaeologically native Israeli land. Jerusalem itself is there. And what the Palestinians actually want, what they actually will say, is they want a nation from river to sea, meaning from the Jordan banks to the Mediterranean Sea, which means Israel would not exist. Black Lives Matter is a communist organization. It is not an exaggeration to call them communist, Marxist organization. They explicitly are. They want the end to the Western prescribed nuclear family. They want an end to capitalism. They want everything the Soviets wanted, Black Lives Matter wants. And they believe that the Israelis are white European colonizers, settler colonizers. And they refer to that even in Israel proper. This isn't about the West Bank, and it's not about the Gaza Strip. This is about the nation of Israel. Black Lives Matter is siding with the terrorist group Hamas in the same language. And it is a very clear talking point now that it is apartheid. Israel's bombing of Gaza ignores the Palestinians' right to exist. This is Ali Velshi, an MSNBC opinion columnist who is very much a progressive and sympathetic to the Palestinians. Here's something that gets lost these days when we talk about the Middle East. There's currently no existential threat to the state of Israel. Someone actually wrote, there is no existential threat to the state of Israel, as we've seen 3,500 Hamas rockets go into Israel. That's a matter guaranteed by the United States, whose longstanding technological assistance and diplomatic support guarantees that anyone who seriously messes with the Israelis will face the military and economic wrath of the United States, even Saudi Arabia, a country once considered to be Israel's lifelong archenemy, is on side these days. The real issue in Israel is that Palestinians are at best third-class citizens in the nation of their birth. Under international law, Israel has a right to exist and defend itself, especially from external threats, but Palestinians have no state to protect their right to exist, a fact that seems to get missed when tensions flare. Now, wait just a damn minute. Why would we give the Palestinians a state when they are in charge of the Gaza Strip? All the Jews are removed, and what do? They promptly handed it over to a terrorist organization. It sounds like a very clever talking point. Israel is an apartheid state. You hear it more and more from the left. Israel is an apartheid state. And now you've got Ali Velshi at MSNBC saying there's no existential threat to Israel. Don't believe your eyes. Don't believe your eyes with 3,500 rockets from Hamas flying into Israel stopped only because of the Iron Dome. No, there's no existential threat. There's no external threat. There's no internal threat. There's no threat. This is an actual sentence written by an MSNBC commentator. There is currently no existential threat to the state of Israel. Really? You've got the majority of Palestinians support the end of the Israeli nation. You've got Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran want the end of Israel. They declare a Palestinian state from river to sea, meaning the end of Israel. Israel left the Gaza Strip, completely left it, handed it over to the Palestinians. And they promptly put Hamas in charge of it. It's not by fear. There's no uprising against Hamas. They're willingly part of Hamas. Hamas is a designated terrorist organization that wants the elimination of Israel and uses the Gaza Strip from which to launch attacks on a daily basis. The rocket attacks you're seeing now are not new. They happen every single damn day. It's the volume of the attacks that's different. And why? Because the Palestinians were going to have elections. And Fatah, the party of Yasser Arafat, is in charge now with a guy named Mahmoud Abbas, and he realized he was about to lose to Hamas, the terrorist organization in the West Bank, so he canceled the elections. So Hamas is now lashing out. And so now the left is peddling the talking point that Israel is an apartheid state. No, you know what? If you're an Israeli citizen, whether you're an Arab or a Jew, you get to vote and participate in the election. If you're a Palestinian and you're not an Israeli citizen, you can live in the Palestinian territory. You can go into Israel and get a job. But you've got designated territory to live in, and they want it to be a nation. Except the problem is those in charge don't just want that land territory as a nation. They want an end to Israel itself. The Palestinians have no state to protect their right to exist. You know what? Guess what? Israel was not firing missiles into Palestinian territory until Hamas, that the Gaza Strip citizens put in charge, decided to try to eliminate Israel. The Palestinians have a perfect right to exist. They've chosen to use that right to try to destroy Israel. It's not an apartheid state. If you believe it's an apartheid state, it is a laughable statement. Listen to this. This is one look at a current map of Israel, Gaza, and the occupied territories conjures up only one other example: apartheid-era South Africa. Palestinians cannot freely travel to see relatives or do business in other Palestinian cities without passing through highly intrusive Israeli checkpoints. Why? Let's not dance around that, because Hamas convinced a bunch of them to strap bombs on themselves and blow themselves up on buses. This is revisionist nonsense by an MSNBC correspondent who pretends that Palestinians are some sort of peace-loving citizen. Tell the Israelis who got blown up on buses and in restaurants by Palestinians with bombs strapped to them. And by the way, why do they have to go from the Gaza Strip to the West Bank through a border checkpoint? Because Israel's a sovereign nation, and they've handed control over to Gaza to the Palestinians as if it's a sovereign nation. And what have they chosen to do? Instead of building up their people, they build up armaments to try to destroy Israel. It's a separate territory. That's what they wanted. And now suddenly they're moving the goalposts and trying to claim it's apartheid state. They wanted control of Gaza. The Israelis gave them control of Gaza. They've used it to wage war against Israel. So Israel has had to set up a restricted border that they have to be checked when they pass through so they don't kill Israeli citizens. And Ali Velshi at MSNBC now calls this an apartheid state because we gave them control of Gaza. The Israelis gave them control of Gaza, and now they use it to try to kill Jews. This is propagandistic nonsense that the left believes. I guess if you really wanted to be apartheid, let's give them it. Tear down the border and take back over control of the Gaza Strip, Israel. Oh, well, we can't do that. So wait, you're leaving them in control? Well, then how is that apartheid? Because you're not giving them the rest of Israel? They want to be a separate people. They want to be their own nation, but they can't. Israel can't have a border with them to protect themselves from people who want to kill them. This is where the left in this country is. They're broken. They believe that Israel is a white European colonizer of territory that is not theirs, yet God himself gave it to them thousands of years ago. It was the Roman emperor who threw the Jews out of the territory and let in a group of people who over time became Palestinians, but it was Israel's homeland. If you want to go back before Israel thousands of years ago, well, I guess you can do that, but then you have multiple tribes. You've got Edomites and Ammonites and Canaanites, which were the Israeli people. I guess you could do that if you want. Well, then you need to divide it up territorially to all those original tribes and give the 12 tribes of Israel some land as well. Or you could just recognize that the Israelis came in, united, took it over thousands of years ago, set up a kingdom, and all the archaeological evidence shows that this is true. It's revisionist history to deny it. And to call it an apartheid state, it's like the left calls everything racism and devalues racism. Calling Israel an apartheid state just devalues what apartheid actually was, where you had citizens of a nation corralled into certain areas based on race, That's not what's going on in Israel. The Palestinians want their own land. Israel gave them the Gaza Strip and a good portion of the West Bank, and they've been using it ever since to try to kill the Jews. You never saw that in South Africa. South Africa, of course, was a real apartheid state. It sounds clever when the left says it, but it's not really clever. It's a mental brokenness on their part that they cannot confront the truth. The Palestinians are controlled by terrorists, not out of force, but because they willingly surrendered control to the terrorist group. And if you're willing to surrender control to a terrorist group, you really have no business having a nation, frankly.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show.
In West Hollywood, California, a group of Palestinians began asking people in the street if they were Jewish and then began to beat them up. 10 cars of Palestinians rolled up to an outdoor eatery. It was a sushi restaurant. Asked if there were any Jews there, and people said yes, not knowing what was going on, and the Palestinians began to beat them up. That's where we are. By the way, there's something going on here you also need to understand. This is behind the scenes. There's a headline in the New York Times. Publicly supportive. Biden is said to sharpen his tone with Netanyahu in private. Mr. Biden has spoken publicly about how he once sent Mr. Netanyahu a photograph with the inscription, "Bibi, I don't agree with a damn thing you say, but I love you." President Biden has maintained his public support toward Israel, even as he adopted a somewhat sharper private tone with Benjamin Netanyahu, a calculus shaped by Mr. Biden's longtime relationship with the Israeli leader, as well as growing hopes that Israel's military operations against Hamas are nearing an end. In a phone call on Monday, Mr. Biden warned Netanyahu that he could fend off criticism of the Gaza strikes for only so long, according to two people familiar with the call. That conversation was said to be significantly stronger than an official summary released by the White House. It affirmed Israel's right to self-defense and did not repeat calls by many congressional Democrats for an immediate ceasefire. Now, why does that appear in the New York Times? Well, over to you, Washington Post.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show. The-
In West Hollywood, California, a group of Palestinians began asking people in the street if they were Jewish and then began to beat them up. 10 cars of Palestinians rolled up to an outdoor eatery. It was a sushi restaurant. Asked if there were any Jews there, and people said yes, not knowing what was going on, and the Palestinians began to beat them up. President Biden is increasingly coming into conflict with fellow Democrats as he resists a shift in his party toward a tougher stand on Israel and stronger support for the Palestinians, a disconnect highlighted Tuesday by Biden's visit to a region that is a center of Arab American life in the United States. Biden traveled to the Detroit area to tour an electric vehicle plant and promote his infrastructure plan, an effort to bolster his domestic agenda at a moment of deadly conflict in the Middle East. Arab American protesters gathered at a mosque in Dearborn in advance of the visit, eager to demonstrate their anger as Biden's approach to the conflict. The president faced calls from at least one member of Congress to devote time during Tuesday's trip to meeting with Arab Americans because the plant Biden visited is in an area that is 90% Arab American. But the White House announced no such meeting. So Biden is coming into criticism from the left for being too pro-Israel. And so the Biden administration does a story, hopefully leaked to the New York Times, knowing the Washington Post story is coming, saying, well, actually, the White House transcript was very pro-Israel, but it was way firmer on the phone. He was actually more adamant that it stop. The phone call and others, this back to the New York Times, the phone call and others since the fighting started last week reflect Mr. Biden and Mr. Netanyahu's complicated 40-year relationship. It began when Mr. Netanyahu was the deputy chief of mission at the Israeli embassy in Washington, and Mr. Biden was a young senator with a passion for foreign affairs. Since then, they've rarely seen eye to eye, but have forged an occasionally chummy working relationship through 7 American presidencies. Mr. Netanyahu has been prime minister for 4 of them, and raging political battles over the Iran nuclear deal and Israeli settlement policy. Today, that relationship is as complicated as ever. Mr. Biden's juggling act on Israel, always a challenge for an American president, is especially difficult given that Democrats no longer solidly are in Israel's corner. This is fluffery of the Biden administration. How much do you want to bet? Seriously, how much do you want to bet the Biden team knew this story from the Washington Post was coming? And so they went to the New York Times to get this damage control story of, well, actually, the meeting was more firmer than the transcript said, but it's a complicated relationship. What a juxtaposition between these two stories. Biden administration having to do damage control on its own side. Tell us how the Republicans are at civil war, Mr. Media. Haven't you seen the Liz Cheney, Donald Trump fighting? Good Lord. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson. I'm delighted to be with you. The phone number, if you would like to be with me, is 877-97-ERICK, E-R-I-C-K, 877-973-7425. I'm someone just made a point on Twitter. Let me give this person credit. I actually, believe it or not, don't like to take other people's ideas. I'm just really jealous I didn't point this out, and this person did. Who tweeted this? Oh, Derek Hunter did. I knew him. Derek Hunter. He's on WCBM up in Baltimore. Writes for Town Hall. Democrats have more sympathy for terrorists in Gaza than they do any of the black business owners who had their life's work destroyed by BLM and Antifa. He's not wrong. It really is remarkable that the very media outlets and progressives who told us that burning down businesses isn't violence, after all they've got insurance, are outraged about Israel blowing up what we now know was a Hamas building where they controlled 3 floors for intelligence and terror operations, in which the Associated Press and Al Jazeera also occupied the offices. By the way, the AP had been there for years, and it's been documented by multiple other press outlets that Hamas operated out of the building. And suddenly we've got the people who told us that we had mostly fiery but mostly peaceful protests, and that burning down buildings wasn't violence, are suddenly like, oh my gosh, they blew up the building. How dare they? This isn't no, it was a fiery but mostly peaceful protest, y'all. They got insurance on the building. It wasn't violence. I mean, that's what they say in this country. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If Antifa and Black Lives Matter burned down a building in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and it's a fiery but mostly peaceful protest, and it's not violence because they have insurance and it was just a building and no lives were lost, well, then the same goes for the AP building in Hamas territory that was also used by Hamas. It was a fiery but mostly peaceful protest by Israel, and it was not violence because no lives were lost, and they've got insurance on the building anyway, I'm sure. They can rebuild. I'm sure Hamas can use international charitable aid to rebuild the building in the same way they used it to build their rockets. It works. Might as well go with it. Now, I should move on. There's actually news I want to spend some time with. Nancy Pelosi has come out in favor of a boycott, diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics.
Said if we don't speak out against human rights violations in China for commercial reasons, we lose all moral authority to speak out for human rights anywhere. So how sad it is to see the Olympic corporate sponsors look the other way on China's abuses out of concern for their bottom line, with some even lobbying against the bipartisan Uyghur forced labor bill. Imagine they're lobbying against a bill of forced labor when our country has declared this a genocide. Here's what I propose, and join those who are proposing, is a diplomatic boycott. I don't know if it's possible because we have not succeeded in the past, and I'm a big sports fan. I watch the Olympics in the middle of the night. You ever see me during Olympic season? I'm never sleeping. I'm always watching because usually it's in a different time zone. And to see the discipline, the focus, the dedication of our athletes out there is just a source of such pride. Let's honor them at home. Let's not honor the Chinese government by having heads of state go to China to show their support for their athletes.
Nancy Pelosi doesn't necessarily want a boycott of the Olympics. I'm torn on this issue, just so you know. By the way, I want you to know this may be one of the few times I agree with Nancy Pelosi that there's no reason any diplomat should go to Beijing. And honestly, I think that the sponsors should pull out. If Beijing wants the Olympics, they're a communist nation. They can pay for it themselves. They can own the whole thing. They're going to anyway. But I don't think that we need to give it any credibility. I don't know that NBC News should even cover it. Now, I realize that if the athletes do go, that you're going to want to see your athletes and you're going to want to see them beat the Chinese. But I think we've got to deal with the issue of China. This is from ESPN. Groups alleging human rights abuses against minorities in China are calling for a full-blown boycott of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, a move likely to ratchet up pressure on the International Olympic Committee, athletes, sponsors, and sports federations. A coalition representing Uyghurs, Tibetans, residents of Hong Kong, and others issued a statement Monday calling for the boycott, eschewing lesser measures that had been floated, such as a diplomatic boycott and further negotiations with the IOC or China. The time for talks with the IOC is over, Ledong Thethong of the Tibet Action Institute said in an exclusive interview with the Associated Press. This cannot be games as usual or business as usual, not for the IOC and not for the international community. Now, I mentioned this story yesterday, and one of the interesting points here is, let me read you this. The IOC has repeatedly said it must be neutral and stay out of politics. The Switzerland-based body is essentially a sports business, deriving about 75% of its income from selling broadcast rights and 18% more from sponsors. It also has observer status at the United Nations. We are not a super world government, IOC President Thomas Bach said. China's foreign ministry has criticized the politicization of sports and has said any boycott is doomed to failure. China has denied accusations of genocide against the Uyghur people. A recent U.S. State Department report stated explicitly that genocide and crimes against humanity have taken place in the past year against Muslim Uyghurs and other minorities in the western region of Xinjiang. Interestingly enough, IOC's top sponsors, NBC News is one, generates 40% of all IOC revenue. So NBC generates 40% of all IOC revenue. Why are we supporting the Beijing Olympics? It's one thing to say, well, let the athletes go compete. I understand that. The athletes have been busting their butts for years to get to the level of being able to go compete in the Olympics. And I understand that. But I also understand that the Chinese are engaged in a genocide. Not just Uyghurs, but their Christian population as well is being exterminated. They are a communist nation intent on being a world superpower and doing so by running roughshod over the world, an illiberal government, not just an illiberal government, a communist government, an authoritarian state. At a time the left in this country is so convinced that the Republicans are becoming an authoritarian party and must be stopped, they sure aren't doing a damn thing about an authoritarian government that wants to take over the world. China doesn't want an Asian sphere of influence. They want a global sphere of influence. They're building an air base or military base in the Caribbean. I think we got to consider a boycott. And beyond a diplomatic boycott, there should be a sponsor boycott. Now, that's not going to happen. Nike is perfectly happy to use child labor in China to make its products. Disney is perfectly happy to make movies in areas of China where there are concentration camps and use the Chinese people to help them. Apple is perfectly happy to make its products in China. We have a problem the Chinese understand so well, that capitalists are perfectly willing to sell out their grandmother as long as they can make money. And the Chinese are taking advantage of this capitalist sentiment, or at least the parody of it, and big business, frankly, really is willing to do that. I struggle on the issue of the athletes, because the athletes have, for years, they're at the top of their game to be able to go compete and to be able to win. I mean, think about the 1980 Olympics and the hockey game? The Americans beat the Russians. It was a huge mental and moral victory for the United States. But I also understand that the more we give attention to China, including something that they will use as for propaganda, that we're giving them a level of clout I don't know that we need to give them. And I struggle with what to do in that regard. And I think that the appropriate compromise is probably to let the athletes go, but do a diplomatic and sponsor boycott. Let the teams go. American sponsors, Coke, McDonald's and the like, Home Depot, sponsor them, get them there. But the blatant advertising and the NBC coverage and the pomp and circumstance, NBC's not going to critically cover China. They're not. And I think we need to downplay the Beijing Olympics lest we give Beijing the international celebrity and credibility that they want. I do agree with Nancy Pelosi that there should be an international boycott. If there's not an overall boycott of the Olympics, if we're not canceling the Olympics, if we're not going to boycott the Olympics, we should send no diplomatic representatives to Beijing and give them that level of insult. While our athletes can compete and hopefully crush the Chinese athletes and show that we're number one, don't send the moral authority of the American diplomatic mission to Beijing to stand in a box with the dictator of China pretending that all is well. I think that's problematic. I struggle with this one because I know the hard work of the athletes, but I also know what China wants is a big PR victory, and I'm not sure that we need to give that PR victory to them. I'm thinking out loud here on this one, but I agree with Nancy Pelosi that we should at least have a diplomatic boycott. And it pains me to agree with her on anything, but I think we should have a diplomatic boycott, even if we send our athletes to China. Let's go to the phones on this one. Morgan, I was kind of hoping you were listening so that you would call in. How are you?
I'm doing all right, Eric. How are you doing?
Good. So for those of you who don't know, this is my friend Morgan, who was a kayaker, was competing for the Olympics and has strongly held views on this issue.
I do, and I happen to tune into your show kind of while you're in the middle of it, so I may have missed some of your.
So let me tell you where I am. I struggle with this one because I know the hard work that people like you put in to get to the Olympics, and I'm not sure we need an athletic boycott, but having the diplomats say we're not going to go give China moral credibility by having us stand with President Xi and watch this, having NBC not give the glowing favorable coverage that NBC tends to do with these countries. I think maybe there's something to that while still allowing the athletes to compete. But I'm not sure because I kind of also understand if the athletes go, it gives China the PR victory they want. So weigh in on this.
Yeah. So when you say diplomatic boycott, what do you mean by that exactly?
So, the world leaders tend to go for the opening of the Olympics and they hang out with the president of the country and they pat him on the back and say, job well done. So don't send Joe Biden or Kamala Harris over to Beijing for the Olympics.
Well, I think that they feel right at home in China anyway.
Fair.
But but aside from that, one thing that's interesting, and I don't think that a lot of people actually realize this, is that the United States Olympic team is one of the only countries in the entire world that is not funded or even subsidized by governmental funding or government funding. The entire USOC is funded by either grants or donations or sponsorships from these large corporations. So, when I say, I think the athlete boycott, if that were to happen, would have to come straight from the athletes. I don't see how that the USSC or the United States could technically boycott the games anyway when they don't have any skin in the game in terms of funding, but they still profit off of the athletes' experiences and their competitions themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Now, Jimmy Carter orchestrated the boycott, I guess, of the Moscow Olympics that one time. The government, I'm sure, has some clout there, but
changed.
Yeah, but can you talk about though? Because I'm running short of time here, but talk about the athlete experience of what it takes to get there.
The athlete experience is if you want to go to the Olympics, that has to be your sole and only focus. You have to eat, breathe, sleep, and dream about your sport, and it has to be 100% all the time. You're constantly training, you're constantly traveling. You know, the thing that most people are worried about the least are politics, unless those politics are interfering with you being able to do your sport. And so I would see it, except for these, you know, top elite level, extremely popular and successful athletes when it comes to money, I would see the vast majority of athletes not looking to boycott the Olympics simply because they put in so much time and effort and sacrifice just to try and make it to that single race. I don't see a boycott happening, although I do agree with some of your points on why one should. But from an athlete's perspective, I wouldn't support it.
Yeah. All right. That's fair. Listen, thank you for calling. I got to go to a commercial break. It's always good to talk to you, and glad you were listening so we could get your perspective on this one.
Well connected and well respected.
Hi there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Delighted to have you with me today. I don't think we're going to be able to decide on the boycott thing with the Olympics, but I'm more and more leaning towards that just because I don't think we need to give Beijing any more credible standing on the world stage. I want to switch though to a different topic. You're more than welcome to chime in on that if you want. I want to play you some audio of Barack Obama. He was on what's his name show? Oh, I can see that the British guy. Anyway, this one.
When it comes to aliens, there's some things I just can't tell you on air.
But you'll tell us off air. Great.
You know, no. Look. The truth is that when I came into office, I asked. Right, I was like, all right, is there the lab somewhere where we're keeping the alien specimens in spaceship? And they did a little bit of research, and the answer was no. But what is true, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. And so, I think that people still take seriously trying to investigate and figure out what that is. But I have nothing to report to you today.
So it was James Corden show. Thanks, Philip. James Corden show. And we continue to hear this buzzing. And, there are a couple of takes on this that are circulating out there on the UFO stuff. Barack Obama confirming there are things we can't explain. One of the takes I've seen from some commentators, mainstream commentators, is that the government's known about UFOs all along. They know that the documents are about to come out, and so they're trying to do damage control in advance so that they don't have to acknowledge they've been lying to us for 60 years that the aliens are real. I think the smarter commentators out there are saying that the odds are this is intelligence operations from the Chinese or the Russians, that they have developed drones. It is not a coincidence. I don't think that they're hovering over military installations. Why? Because if you hover over military installations, the government is going to ping you to try to figure out what you are. And in the identification mode of using whatever technology the government has to be able to identify, that can then be relayed back so that the Chinese know how to blind us before their attacks, as well as any other intelligence they get. But also, there are smart commentators who point out the Chinese have been stealing our IP for 20 years. This has been going on for so long, it almost makes it unlikely that they're the culprits, given that they just haven't seemed to be technologically up to snuff for decades and have had to steal all of our IP just to get ahead. The fallback is always the angels and demons. I think we know angels and demons exist. We don't know that little green men exist, so maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Why, hello there. Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Are you ready for the great crime wave? Because it's happening. The crime wave is upon us. Can I just say, I don't know where y'all are listening. We're all over the place these days, but I am south of Atlanta, Georgia, and Macon, Georgia. We ourselves have our own problems, but Atlanta is just overwhelmed these days with shootings. They tend to happen between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., and they happen all over the place in the city, and it's causing problems. They're turning into a tent city. You've got homeless people all over the place, living on the streets. They've set up tents. So in the metro Atlanta area, you have the state capitol in downtown Atlanta, and running along the side of it, north-south, is what's called the connector. It's I-75 and I-85 combined as one interstate. And on the south side of the capitol, there's an east-west interstate that's I-20. And when you go from I-75 headed southbound and you're headed west on I-20, there's this big curve, and in that curve is a big grassy area, and it's covered in tents of homeless. It's like a homeless camp. And there is more and more violence in the area. There are more and more urban camping, the left likes to call it. It's no longer homelessness, it's urban camping. Now, who the hell goes and camps on concrete? I saw some quote, somebody on social media was talking this morning that the best campsites are found, not made. Oh, look, I found this plot of warm cement. I'm going to pitch my tent there, except some of the homeless people are pitching different tents. My goodness. It's not what you want, and it's not just Atlanta. It is spreading across the country. Axios has a story here. Police recruiting suffers as morale hits new low. Police departments across the country are struggling to attract applicants after a year of racial justice protests against police use of excess force and calls for police reform dampen morale within the profession. Recruiting deficits add strain to existing forces and could increase costs through overtime or employee burnout, per the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And if Americans want better police forces, city officials say, this isn't the way to get them. The trend comes as activists in some cities suggest that there could be another long, hot summer of unrest in the name of ending police brutality and racial inequity. Bring it on. Let America see you people for who you are. Applications were down 26% during the first 4 months of 2021 compared to the same period last year, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department spokesman Rob Tufano tells Axios. The police department got about 300 applications last month for its newest class of recruits, roughly 50% fewer in Des Moines. In Northwest Kansas, one recent group who passed initial testing for the Fayetteville Police Department had only 10 applicants qualify for interviews compared to what's typically around 40. It's not just an issue of getting new talent in the door, but keeping the existing force intact. In Minneapolis, the epicenter of calls to defund and dismantle the police, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, police morale is at an all-time low. Last year, 105 officers left the department, twice as many as usual. In Denver, a pandemic-battered budget forced the city to hire 97 fewer officers than 2020, and some of the 81 officers who were injured in last summer's unrest haven't returned to active duty or to full duty. Amid calls to defund the police, Tampa Mayor Jane Castor, who was police chief for Florida's largest city from 2009 to 2015, won't touch the police budget. A Bloomberg report on police budget spending in American cities since Floyd's death shows that Tampa has the largest police budget increase among all 50 cities studied. We're one of the safest cities in the United States for our size, and that's because our police department and our community work hand in hand to make the neighborhood safe. Data show that higher police spending doesn't necessarily equal less crime, and violent crime is up in almost every big city during the COVID pandemic, including Tampa. There's the data for you for what's going on. When you attack the police, where 99% of them are good, law-abiding, hardworking Americans who want to keep you and me safe, what you do is signal that's not a job that you should get into. In the metro Atlanta area where I am most familiar, one of the things that has happened is when the politicians began to make the police the bad guys, the police couldn't police anymore because they were scared that if I do something and a mistake happens, if the bad guy does something and it's caught on film and can be characterized as badly against me, well, then I'm going to jail, I'm going to be prosecuted, I'm going to be fired, I'm going to be the bad guy when I'm not. So why do the job? Policing is not rocket science. Can we all acknowledge that? Now, don't hear me disparaging the police. I'm trying to make a point here, and I'm realizing some people get hypersensitive when you say something like, oh, you're calling the police stupid. No, pay attention. I'm about to make a point. Policing is not rocket science. And it's also not rocket science to understand that when you have men and women who put their lives on the line to keep you and me safe, to make sure bad guys aren't breaking into our houses, to make sure people aren't carjacking us, to make sure banks aren't being robbed, to make sure people aren't being murdered, to investigate the murders when they happen and ensure that justice happens. It's not rocket science to understand that when those people are under attack from the mob, fewer people want to do those things. You used to have kids who wanted to grow up to be police officers, and now they're told if you're a police officer, you're a racist. It doesn't matter. If you're black, you're an Uncle Tom sellout. We ask them now to videotape themselves on the job, unlike pretty much any other profession. We allow armchair quarterbacks to nitpick those videos and make claims, wildly distorting what actually happened in some cases. We hold them accountable. And you're not allowed to have a nuanced conversation. You know, there are bad police officers out there. You talk to any police officer, and they'll tell you there are bad police officers out there. There are bullies. There are people who got into the police force because they want to bully other people. They like to exert authority, and they are in the vast minority of police officers. Many of the police officers I talk to say there needs to be more training, and there aren't budgets for it, but there needs to be better training and more training. More thought-out training, but also that many of the people who comment on police forces in this country really have no freaking clue what they're talking about when they talk about the sort of police force training and reform that's needed. Like, let's bring a social worker to the crime scene day is nonsense. But the American people, I think, fundamentally understand this stuff. I do think the American people tend to understand what's going on here, and they would rather a few bad police officers on the force and discipline them when they're caught than have no police at all. Kind of like the old saying that we would rather a few guilty people be found not guilty than to have an innocent man be executed. You would rather have a few bad police officers than have no police officers at all. But the Democrats would rather you believe we should have no police officers at all, lest we have a couple of bad police officers. But the problem here is that the American people, they get it. They understand it. For the second time in 4 years, according to the Washington Post, Representative Sean Maloney, a Democrat of New York, drew one of the toughest assignments, investigating what went wrong in a disappointing election. The 2017 After Action report followed even more devastating results, a clean Republican sweep of holding the House, while Donald Trump won the presidency and Republicans retained the Senate. This time around, President Biden won by 7.1 million votes, and Democrats gained 3 seats to claim the Senate majority, while Democrats lost 11 seats in the House on Election Day 2020, and Speaker Pelosi barely clings to the majority. Maloney, the new Democrat of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, worked with senior staff to analyze 600 polls and House races last year, matched up against voter files from the November election and other state and local data. The 52-page PowerPoint report, which Maloney presented to the caucus during a Tuesday evening call, splits the difference on the key question of whether Democrats just had a bad polling or a bad agenda that turned away voters. Maloney laid out how Democrats simply underestimated the number of hardcore Trump voters, and with more Trump voters in the voting booth, the Republicans' attack against the defund the police movement proved more potent than Democrats ever anticipated. The lies and distortions about defund and socialism carried a punch, but the Republicans think it got them over a 10-foot wall when Trump's turnout gave them a 7-foot ladder, Maloney said. Before November, the party had won the popular vote in the presidential contest, had also gained seats in the House in 13 of the last 14 elections, which fueled expectations for Democrats. Instead, after those losses, Democrats started a fierce internal debate about whether some of the liberal stars inside their caucus who've embraced labels such as democratic socialism tagged other incumbents in swing districts with an unpopular brand. Threading the needle, Maloney's deep dive had to both review past mistakes while helping prepare the fast-approaching midterm elections. Polling missed the Trump surge at the very end. Okay, here's the thing that you need to understand here, is that Sean Maloney can't really speak the truth to the Democrats anymore. This is one of the problems you find in communist countries. People can't really speak the truth to power because they'll wind up in the gulag. Here comes Sean Maloney. He can't really say, yeah, your defund the police socialist rhetoric was bad. He's got to say, well, the polls were wrong, misunderstood the Trump support out there, and that nearly got them where they are, but they didn't take back the majority, and that's why. When you know and I know, and every single Democrat who has any sort of common sense knows, including most of the Democrats who lost, that in fact the Democrats and their defund the police nonsense and bring on socialism nonsense spooked a whole lot of people who didn't like Donald Trump, so they voted Democrat for president and down ballot voted Republican. And if you understand the election wasn't stolen, you can process that clearly. And Sean Maloney knows it and had to dance around that fact lest he get canceled by his own caucus, because socialists and authoritarians don't like people speaking truth to power. And the Democratic Party is increasingly an authoritarian party of wokes who want to cancel you if you say something they don't like. Now, on the police and defund effort, let's go to Johnny calling from Macon. Johnny, welcome to the program.
Hi, Eric. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I think I'm doing fine. I'm a police officer here in Macon. I just don't see the hate and the racist attitudes that we keep hearing about every day in the news and the media. And I also believe that the Democrats are wanting to defund all the police departments because they want to enact a national police force.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me.
Guess who done that in the 40s?
Yeah. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Enact a national police force with a common standard. I will tell you that the hate and invective against the police, I don't think I'm here in Macon with you. I think you're right, but in major urban areas, particularly areas where you've got big left-wing college campuses, I think you're more likely to see it, the agitation of left-wing activists on college campuses and activists. I certainly think you see it in a place like Atlanta, where the mayor blames the police for everything. We're lucky here. We got a new mayor, and the old mayor himself wasn't hostile to police, but gosh, in some places they try to make you guys the fall guy for everything. So, Johnny, let me ask you a question. As a police officer, do you have to wear one of the body cameras?
I don't now. When I was on patrol and when I was on the heat unit, yes, I had to. So,
are you familiar? I would actually like to get your thoughts on the immediate release of this stuff, because I feel aggrieved, I guess, for police officers when I see a bunch of idiots out there who armchair quarterback a situation that they weren't at. Like, oh, look, that happened in 3 seconds. Surely he could have pulled his gun and shot the person in the leg instead of killing him.
Well, we're not trained to shoot in the leg.
Right.
And we have a simulator at our agency that is in real time, and it's just about impossible. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible, but it's not hard. It's not easy to do.
Yeah.
As far as releasing the body camera footage, if you didn't do anything wrong, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, that's fair. My apprehension on this is nowadays so many people want to look at the camera footage and then armchair quarterback the situation when they weren't there. And yeah, I think you can certainly catch bad things happening, but oftentimes you see something that wasn't bad. And if you're someone who thinks the police are out to get you, well, then immediately you're going to conclude whatever you guys did, you were a bad guy. So it's an unfortunate situation. But at least you're here in Middle Georgia, where I think people, regardless of race, income, and education, understand the police actually have the community's back, as opposed to places like Portland, Oregon, and the like. Don't want to go there.
That's very true.
Look,
Nope.
go ahead.
I'm just, like I said, I go to just about every neighborhood in this city.
Uh-huh.
And I can't tell you how many times I've been invited into a house because they cooking lunch and they tell me to come on in and have something to eat, and I have to tell them no. I just don't see all the hatred for the police that we hear, like you said, in more metropolitan areas like Atlanta and all. That's probably where it's mostly at.
Yeah, well, it's because we live in God's country too. Johnny, listen, I got to go to commercial break. Thanks for the phone call. We do. Hey, y'all, I just, people ask me all the time, why aren't you in New York or Washington or even Atlanta? And because I like Middle Georgia. The people, they're nice here.
There's not my truth or your.
It is Erick Erickson here, and this hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. They are in Noonan, Georgia. They can help you wherever you are in the United States of America. They want to help you. They've been helping small businesses become big businesses since the early 1990s. Frost family, great Christian family. I've known them for a while. They're heavily involved in conservative politics, and they are great at what they do. They can help get to yes on lending decisions where a lot of banks are telling you no in this current economy. They want to help you, but they do big deals, 6 figures and higher. They don't do little deals. They're good at big deals. So if you need a big deal, go to a big deal, First Liberty. Go to firstlibertyga.com. That's their website, firstlibertyga.com. Spend just 5 minutes with them. See if they're a good fit. Speaking of deals and money, have you seen what's happening to Bitcoin? Things are not going well for cryptocurrency at the moment. Bitcoin is plunging. Why? China wants to get into the cryptocurrency game. And because China wants to get into the cryptocurrency gang, it is going after Bitcoin, the leader of the cryptocurrency gang. Bitcoin has plunged. China is cracking down on digital coins. This is from CNN. China has taken more steps to crack down on the digital coins. The Chinese have decided, they've issued a series of financial statements, and the financial institutions and payment companies should not participate in any transaction related to cryptocurrency, nor should they provide crypto-related services to their clients. Prices of cryptocurrency have skyrocketed and plummeted recently, and speculative trading has bounced back. This seriously harms the safety of people's property and disturbs normal economic and financial order, said the statement from regulators supervising the People's Bank of China and the Chinese Insurance and Banking Commission. China's chilly attitude towards cryptocurrency goes back years. While the government doesn't completely ban crypto, regulators in 2013 declared Bitcoin was not a real currency and forbade financial and payment institutions from transacting with it. At the time, they cited the risk that Bitcoin could be used for money laundering. As a matter of fact, Bitcoin can be used for a lot of criminal transactions, but Bitcoin can also be used by people who want to evade the radar of a ruthless regime that engages in concentration camps. So China doesn't like that, and they want to stamp it out. They also want to compete. They want a digital currency of their own backed by their paper currency. And so they're about to get into cryptocurrency, and they're trying to wipe out the competition. So Bitcoin is crashing. Ethereum is crashing. Other cryptocurrencies are crashing. I still, again, I think that cryptocurrency is all the rage these days, but the tulip bulbs at one point were also all the rage. And I get people all the time, no, they're different. Let me explain why. But the problem is that if you want to go for something that's backed by value, a cryptocurrency is backed by an algorithm. At least the people who say the U.S. currency should be on the gold standard have some measurable sense of the currency must be valued by something other than what a state says it's worth. I don't think that cryptocurrencies are sustainable, particularly as so many illiberal governments like China and Russia decide to exert themselves on the world stage, because the cryptocurrencies are backed by an algorithm. And are they really even currency? Who actually uses Bitcoin for transactions? People save it and expect other people to save it and drive up the value. And then when someone starts cashing out, it causes a frenzy and more cash out. I don't think it's long-term stable. And when a government snaps its finger and says you can't use this anymore, the value of it goes away because there's only an algorithm behind it. There's not a gold bar or a silver coin. It's going to become more and more problematic as the Chinese also decide to invade the market themselves and start competing with their own cryptocurrency, which is exactly what's going on here. But also the Chinese want to be able to control it and track it, and you can't track Bitcoin, which is also, to China's point, why money launderers and drug lords love to use Bitcoin, but they're not the only people.